Hello, everyone. I am Hanbos here today with Steve. I remember you that I am consultant, life strategy consultant, and breathing behavior analyst and specialist, and the creator of Miracle Brave Mastery. And today I'm very happy and excited to discuss with Steve. And we will have the discussion about the power of connection, but both in personal and professional lives. Because with Steve, an expert in mindfulness and cognitive behavioral psychology, we think that it's very important today to share with you some tips, some thoughts about what means connections, but in our fast world, genuine connections are often overlooked, and yet they are crucial for our success and personal fulfillment. So we will dive deep in the connection, how we can bring connection, how it's important to have connection, and we all share some personal stories for you. And I want to start, if you are okay, Steve, with me, with my personal experience, because I think that personal experience is very important for us and for you. And I've seen firsthand how meaningful connections can transform both a career and a personal life. Early in my journey, I experienced accident, experienced my dad death and a divorce, and all of that which left me my feeling isolated. And it was through building authentic relationships that I found my path to recovery and my professional growth. And all of these connections provided support, opportunities, and also a sense of belonging that was pivotal in my life. So let's start with you, Steve. If you want to start with what you think about connection, what you can bring, and only why it is so important to have connections in our lives.
Brilliant. Thanks, Anne. And thanks for sharing your own experience as well. I think that is very, very important. So when I was thinking about this particular video, I asked myself, why do we need social connections? And that reminded me of a book that I mentioned to you a few minutes ago, but I'll mention it again for everybody's benefit. It's a book by a guy called Matthew Lieberman, and it's about why our brains are rewired for social connections. So, and he said, because social connections are essential for human well-being, they're essential for our survival, and that they provide emotional support, they reduce stress, and they foster a sense of well-being and purpose. So think about those few words. Okay, he wrote a whole book about this stuff, and that's just a few words pulled from the book. So look him up, Matthew Lieberman, and look for the heading of the title, Social. The rest is written after the column. So as I said, I asked myself, why do we need social connections? Well, there's our mental health, for starters. Social connections give us emotional support. Having friends, having family, people we can turn to when the going gets tough, that provides emotional support, and that can help reduce stress, anxiety, and other challenges. I'm not saying it reduces, it can help to reduce. So it's part of the bigger picture. Social connections as well, they give us, and some of this sounds obvious, but we kind of forget it. I'm going to say it out loud for everybody's benefit, a sense of belonging. Social connections help us feel like we're part of a community, something bigger than just ourselves. They remind us that we're not alone in this world. And that helps us to reduce any feelings we might have about loneliness, isolation, and so on. Okay, a few minutes ago, Anne and I were talking about the Monty Python film, Life of Brian. where there's a hermit living in a pit, and Brian jumps into the pit and stands on the hermit's toes, and the hermit shouts out, "Oh, you stole my toe!" And then he realizes that he hasn't spoken for something like 7 years, and he has a tantrum because Brian made him speak. And he's trying to imply that he doesn't need the social, but really he does need the social, and Brian reminded him by jumping on his toe. Watch the movie if you've not seen it, it's very funny. And then we can get on to stuff like physical health. And there are studies out there. Now, this is fascinating. There are studies out there that show that people who have strong social connections tend to live longer than people who don't have strong social connections. If anybody who lives in the UK will be aware of the television adverts that come out every year around about Christmas time, and they encourage us to look after people. They encourage us to take notice of anybody who seems to be lonely, anybody who's on their own at Christmas time. Christmas time is great, brilliant, but we need it all the time, not just Christmas time. Christmas time is not enough. These connections matter. So these studies say that we live longer if we have good social connections. Social connections as well can encourage us to have healthier behaviors. Now, that sounds a bit kind of strange, doesn't it? Sounds a bit weird. So how can they do that? Well, regular exercise, healthy eating, sticking to medical advice. If we have social networks around us who know that we've had some medical advice, they can remind us that we've had it. We might say, "I don't want to hear that, be quiet." I get people saying to me, "Steve, be careful on your mountain bike." So what do? I fall off it and get injured. But still, they're looking out for me. I'm aware of that, and that's very, very positive. There are a lot of other reasons why we need social connections. There's things like cognitive benefits, because engaging in social activity helps us to maintain cognitive functioning, and that reduces risk of cognitive decline as we age. That's quite an interesting one. And there's this thing of mental stimulation. Social connections stimulate us. They're good for us. They help us to thrive. They help us to think. They help us to think new things. Think happy thoughts. They help us to do Peter Pan stuff. All kinds of great things. Have I found anything negative yet? No, I've not, because there's nothing negative in the reasons why we need social connections. Support systems are essential, but we need those support systems to be authentic and real. Think about humans. You meet somebody in the street who you don't know massively well, but you know them well enough to say hi. "Hello, how are you? How do you feel today?" And what do we typically say in response? "I'm okay, thanks." We might not be really, but we say I'm okay anyway. "Oh, I'm not bad. Pamal." So we've got to think about those connections and the reality of those connections, because the reality of the connection matters. The transparency in the connection matters. There's a whole load of things that we're going to come to in a minute. So, in short, these social connections are absolutely fundamental to our health, to our well-being, and to our communities. They're fundamental to all kinds of really good things. So, Anne, what do you think about
Wow,
these?
a lot of things, Steve.
Yeah, I
When
know,
you
I'm sorry. I couldn't help it. I just had to do it.
No, that's okay. But when you talk about authenticity, authentic, oh, it brings me a lot, because for me, authentic connection goes beyond surface level interactions. It's about genuine engagement and mutual understanding. And this authentic connection, it's the ability for me to be true to ourselves while also being open and receptive to others. And we can with authentic connections build with honesty, vulnerability, empathy, and that's allowing individuals to share their true thoughts, feelings, experiences, without fear of judgment. It's another part that fears, because we can see, I will explain in 2 minutes the barrier to connection for me. But in today's fast-paced and often digital-centric world, authentic connections can be rare, but incredibly valuable. It's important because we are in digital era, and we bring connections in the digital way. So we have to understand and being understood that with the authenticity, we can bring together a better connection and empower this connection. And authentic connection provides a sense of belonging, as you say, support, validation, fostering deeper relationships and emotional fulfillment. And authentic connections transcend that superficially and create space for growth, mutual respect, and meaningful collaboration. As its cause, authentic connections is about seeing and being seen, understanding and being understood. So it requires authenticity, courage, willingness to be vulnerable. And when we embrace authentic connections, we cultivate richer, more fulfilling relationships, and all of that contribute to our overall well-being and sense of belonging in the world. So yeah, authenticity is the first part for me for the good connections and to bring more relationships, and it's the same in a personal and professional life. Because I meet a lot of authentic leaders who have success, more success right now, because they use their authenticity and they don't use another identity to excel in their work. See, this authenticity also, I think that it's very important, another part, because I talk about fears. And I have a question after that for you, Steve, because for me, there are two main barriers to connection. And it's important to talk about the two barriers. You are the fear of judgment, the fear to be judged. Many of us fear judgment, whether it's in professional setting or personal relationship. And this fear can prevent from reaching out and forming authentic relationships. And it's important to remember that everyone has their own insecurities and that genuine connections are built on understanding and empathy. What do you think about fear of judgment? Do you have in your work, Steve, in your background in mindfulness, cognitive behavioral psychology, how do you see mindfulness practice helping individuals to overcome this challenge of fear of judgment?
Judgment is a big one. It's huge. Why is it? Think about it for a minute. Almost from day one, as in babies, we are brought up to judge. It's not something that's done in an intentional way to hurt us or to hurt anybody else, but everything around us is judged. There are judgments being made at school, for example. This child is doing well, this child is not doing well. They're being judged on some criteria or other. We're judged on crazy things. I remember one of my friends at school had red hair, really, really red hair. And he was judged because he had red hair. He was judged differently to the other kids who didn't have red hair. We're judged because we're old, because we're young. We're judged because of the political party that we support or we don't support. So there's a million aspects of judgment around us all the time. So really, it's hardly surprising that we judge because it's kind of built in. It's built in, though, because partly as well, it helps us to protect ourselves, which sounds a bit strange. So what do I do with people who fear judgment or who feel that they're being judged all of the time? Or also, on the other hand, I also work with people who feel that they are judging and they don't want to judge. They feel that it's not the thing they ought to be doing. So what can they do about it? So there are kind of two groups of people, those who judge and those who don't judge, but feel judged. So
that's interesting. It's really interesting. So when you say the field, it brings me for two significant challenges to authentic connections: perception and emotional state. That for me, perception is a pivotal role in shaping our interactions. How past experiences, biases, and self-image influence how we see and how we engage with the world. And if we perceive ourselves as unhealthy or fear judgment, we may struggle to fully connect with others. It's crucial for me to recognize that our perception can act as a barrier to forming genuine connections. And the other challenge is emotional state, because our emotional states significantly impact our ability to connect authentically. Emotions such as stress, anxiety, insecurity can trigger behaviors that hinder meaningful interactions. For instance, when we are stressed, we might become defensive or withdrawn, making it challenging to establish genuine relationships. And in my work, in my practice, Miracle Breath Mastery, I focus on addressing these challenges through conscious breathing techniques and neuroplasty. By calming the mind and body, conscious breathing helps manage emotional states, and it allows us to approach interactions with clarity and openness. And this practice is not only to enhance our emotional well-being, but also transform our perception, making us more receptive to authentic connections. Yeah. And you know, Steve, by understanding and addressing the influence of perception and emotional states, we can create a foundation for deeper and more meaningful connection. And through your mindfulness practice as well, and my conscious breathing work and my work finally, we empower ourselves to engage with others more authentically, enriching our personal and professional lives. That's for our audience very important. That's why Steve and me, we are here today, because we are authentic connections, authentic relationships to bring you and to empower you. That's it, Steve. What do you think about that?
I think that's beautiful, and I'm not going to repeat anything you just said. However, there's always a however. Here's a little story. It's based on a very old Buddhist story.
Yeah.
So I'm not a Buddhist. I like some of the Buddhist stories. So a guy looks out of his door one morning and it's raining. And he says, I'm not going out there, it's raining. I don't want to get wet. No, stop for me, I'm not going out. But Buddha comes along and says, wait a minute. If you open your door and it's raining, you don't know whether it will still be raining by the time you get to the end of the street, or whether the rain will have stopped by the time you get to the end of the street. It could be that the rain will stop and the sun will come out. You don't know. So if you keep enforcing judgment on your surroundings, you will never know what could be, which is quite an interesting thought. Okay, I changed the story just a little bit. So the question that kind of comes from that is, what makes people afraid to connect? They're judging, they're not connecting. What is it that makes people afraid? Well, in my experience, in my practice, fear of rejection comes up frequently. People don't want to be rejected or feel as though they've been abandoned. Often when we look into these situations, we find that way back on their timeline in their life, there has been something where they've felt abandoned, and it's been repeated. It's been built upon, built upon, built upon, until it becomes so big that the fear of rejection is huge, and their social connections are poor because of the fear of rejection. So that's something we have to manage. Anybody who feels any of these, by the way, as I go through them, if you feel that, yeah, this is me, no problem. Get in touch with Anne or I. Send us a direct message. You don't need to go public. You can send us a direct message and we will respond. Everything we do, we're qualified psychologists. Everything we do is in confidence. So you don't have to worry about things that you might say. Which links to another thing, which is a fear of vulnerability. Opening up to other people often involves sharing personal things.
Yeah.
And that's a tough one sometimes. It can make us feel exposed and highly vulnerable. So we may back off a little bit and we may not get fully involved in the social situation. The social connection is weak because of it. And then we mentioned fear of judgment. Worrying about being judged, being criticized, does prevent people from expressing who they truly are. So they can't develop the authentic connection because they've got this little voice in their head saying, hang on, I'm being judged here. Somebody's going to judge me if I speak. So say what, I'll be quiet. So it gets very difficult. This happened to me some years ago. So I was very sick for a while and I needed support. I was taking medical support. I was taking medication, addictive medication that I wasn't really aware was I was becoming an addict to, but still that was happening. And then at some point it was suggested that I go and see a psychologist, and my head kind of exploded because I thought, wait a minute, I'm a psychologist. No, I don't need to see a psychologist. Not doing that. Why didn't I do that? Because I was scared of being vulnerable in front of a kind of a colleague. It wasn't somebody I worked with, but it was still there was a relationship there, psychologist to psychologist. So I was scared of exposing who I am and what was going on inside of me. I was so scared of that stuff. It was horrible. But I got over it. The psychologist turned out to be really great. And in a positive way, I fell in love with her, but I don't mean love in the romantic sense. And then eventually she said, Steve, we've run out of sessions now, but what I can give to you is that you can join a group. And in this group, you'll be able to explore all the issues and so on. And I didn't like the idea of that at all, because I thought that people may judge me because of what was going on with me. I felt vulnerable. I had an anxiety about sharing what had been happening to me in public, especially with people I didn't know. So there was all kinds of anxieties. And guess what? All of those anxieties and all of those feelings and those judgments were proved wrong. So I did join that group. And because of that group, I got better. Do you know what? I don't know how many times quicker, but a lot faster than I would have done had I been alone without that social connection. So there is something real about the power of social connections. Another one that people struggle with about being afraid to connect is having trust issues, because maybe they've been betrayed in the past. Maybe somebody has broken their trust in the past. So it's hard for them to trust people. Maybe they've been through very difficult relationships, challenging relationships. The damage caused by those relationships make it hard to trust people. There's all kinds of things that can happen to us. So that's just a few of the reasons why people are afraid to connect. And that being afraid to connect means that our connections aren't authentic. And that's difficult. It's difficult for the individual, and it's difficult for the people you're trying to connect with. They notice. If you think about it, when you're in a group, somebody comes in and they're a bit nervous, they perhaps don't really want to be there. Do you notice? I do. And it's not because of what I do for a job. It's because of the human connection. I know when somebody is not fully engaged in that connection. What about you, Anne? What do you think of that?
I observe the behavior of the person who is who refuse and who has fear to open their heart to the connection. And I often see the lack of confidence, and the self-doubt and imposter syndrome can be significant barriers. And I encourage my client to use the breathing work because it's manage anxiety and build confidence, helping them to up to the others. But I think that when we talk about connections, we forget to say that the first connection is with ourselves, with the selves. And when we talk about the selves and say connect to yourself, it's not easy for a lot of people, but by the same reason. And I think that it's a connection like a relationship is the same work with the relationship with the self and relationships with the others. We meet the same barriers, the same issues, the same problematic as well. So I think that when we talk, we can talk a lot about connection. We will have more videos, Steve, together. But today I'm very pleased and I want to share some practical tips for connections. And I want to tell you, everyone, about initiating conversations. Don't be afraid to start meaningful conversation. Ask for open-ended questions, show genuine curiosity, and don't be afraid to share your own experiences to build reports. Don't be afraid to talk about yourself. Your story is inspiring for one person in the world. I'm sure for that. That's the reason why I ask people to write their book, to empower the story and write. Another tips for this connection, practical tips, I think it's showing appreciation. For me, expressing gratitude and recognizing others' contribution strengthen connections, and simple acts of appreciation can have a significant impact on relationships. So you can try this for a day and see how it's empower your relationships, your connection. And practical tips also is finding common ground. That means identify shared interests and goals, and common ground provides a strong foundation for building lasting connections. That's the 3 practical tips that you can use in your daily life and try which one is more helpful for you. But I think that I'm sure that if you try to initiate a conversation, you see the person, you think that the person don't listen to you or don't care about what you say. It's your perception. Try to do it with a smile. Just a smile. You open your heart and you decide to say hello and engage the conversation. And you will see the difference.
Yeah. I think that's perfect. One of the words you used just now, Anne, was curiosity. I think curiosity can be, I use curiosity in mindfulness practice. It's a very powerful tool.
Yeah.
So rather than, oh no, I don't want to speak in that group, for example, I wonder what it would be like to say what I think in that group. How would it feel? I think I'll find out. I'm curious. I really want to know. Rather than, it's scary. I can't do that. Now, sometimes people need help. I said that a few minutes ago, and you said it too. Sometimes people do need our support. They need direct one-on-one support. That's okay.
Mm.
But many of us just have a little bit that we need to perhaps shave away. And curiosity is one way that we can do that. So, for example, just going back to the story, the guy looks outside the door and it's raining. It's raining. So the guy looks out of the door and it's raining. Oh, wow, it's raining. I'll go out and see what happens. I'm curious. I want to know what's going to happen. If it's raining, I'll put on a jacket and do it anyway. That's a positive way to be, because there's no judgment. My perception is currently it's raining. It might change. I don't know. And not worrying about what may or may not become. And I think that is where the biggest problems lie. People spend a lot of time worrying about what may be or may not be.
Of course.
So that's I know that sounds very simplistic, but that's where majority of the problems come from. Do we have anything else? We could talk all day on this subject. I know that.
Yes, no, it's okay. I think that in conclusion, meaningful connections are vital for both professional success, personal well-being. We have a lot to tell about that because it covers a lot of topics, a lot of insight and tips we can cover, because connection is life. And we can do the things by ourselves alone, but we need each other to be supported, to grow. And we can talk about empathy, active listening, genuine interest with others. We can build strong supportive networks. I want to encourage all of you to take a moment today to reach out to someone, whether it's a colleague, mentor, a friend, or us, and start a conversation, show appreciation, begin building a connection that could transform your journey. I encourage that because I think that it's the first part to go out your comfort zone, to try, because you are more than you think.
Yeah, absolutely. Think about as well about self-reliance. It's quite a prized thing in society to be self-reliant. But you know what? It's not always a good thing. It sounds great that I can be self-reliant, but it's not always brilliant. And that's because it can make us hesitant to go to others when we need support.
Mm.
But others provide amazing support. That connection that we can get from other people is incredible. So we don't need to bury our heads in the sand and think we are totally self-reliant, that we are an island, because we're not an island. We function better when we live on the same island as other people. That's enough from me. I'm going to be quiet now. I'm not going to...
No, that's good. That's enough. I think that we make a powerful conversation today, and thank you, Steve, for your insight. I just want to tell to our audience, if you have any questions or thoughts on how build and maintain connections, please share them with us. It's very important to share also your experience. And let's work together to create a community where everyone can thrive through the power of connections. I believe on the power of connections.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anne. It's great to be here with you again.
Thank you, Steve.